I find it a little difficult to say what the subject matter of this seminar is going to be, because it's too fundamental to give it a title. I'm going to talk about what there is. Now, the first thing, though, that we have to do is to get our perspectives with some background about the basic ideas which influence our everyday common sense, our fundamental notions about what life is about.
My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Ben Bugale, and you're listening to pixelprojectradio, a video game and video game club-style podcast where we talk about games we've played, games we like, games we don't like, games we love, games that we hope that you can relate with, or games that you have played as well. Today we're talking about a different sort of game. I suppose the only way to introduce this is, have you ever pondered life's existence or life's meaning? Have you ever thought about the Darwin's theory of musical proto-language? Rick, what game are we talking about today?
Knack 2.
And Bug Snacks. It's a double header, everybody.
Can you imagine if we treated something like Knack 2 with the gravitas of this game?
Let's talk about what it means to reproduce and to be just a passing blip in life. And we spend all of our time playing Knack.
We'd make Donkey so proud. No, we're talking about the game titled Everything.
So hang on to your hats and onto your attention spans, because it's going to get confusing perhaps when we talk about the word everything versus the title everything. At least that's how I would feel as a listener. Like, are they talking about everything or are they talking about the game? And it's like, well, and that's why in the intro I was like, I don't want to say pondering everything because that's the title of the game.
Well, and really the answer is both. I mean, they go hand in hand, and I think that's why this game is titled this way.
Agreed, absolutely. It's just, man, it just feels like something that the less you think, the better, which will also come back as a theme, I think.
Yeah, that very much is a theme. We usually at the top of these episodes give like a spoiler warning, right? We will say we're gonna try not to spoil anything major before the plot. This game deserves a different sort of disclaimer at the beginning. There's not really a story to this game, and mechanically there's also not a lot there. So this episode is largely going to be as much about the game Everything as it is about Rick and Ben sort of discussing their experiences, beliefs, and thoughts on philosophy, Zen, Taoism, and sort of just the state of being. So I could see this episode turning a lot of people off. Maybe not the best intro to Pixel Project Radio.
No, that's fair. If you're looking for us to sit here and dissect a game to its fullest, I would advise you to consider listening or consider listening at a later time. But it's very much going to be a conversation more than just a review.
Right. And I think that's exactly what this game demands, and that's exactly what I think the developers were after when they made this game. This is not a video game, capital V, capital G. This is very much an art project, and I do not use that in a derogatory way. It's like an art game.
It is an art game, and different, I would say, than art games, such as The Unfinished Swan. Like, that is a game based on art, but I would not call it an art game.
Now we're just getting into semantics.
Oh, it's going to get real semantic-y real quick, everybody, so hang on to your existence.
I haven't even begun to semantic. Let's...
Well, Rick, if you are a semantic, do you semantic?
If one exists in this world, does that mean the world peoples? According to some...
You're a person.
You might be shocked to hear.
Yeah, you're not a noun, you're a person, therefore you people. Sorry, we should probably get to our reviews before we... Oh, God. All right, I want you to go first, please.
Okay, I'll keep it short. It is about being as opposed to doing. This notion is not unfamiliar to any who have heard the lectures of Alan Watts or played this game, Everything. To me, everything is best enjoyed as a bridge into the thoughts and the universe of the ideas of Zen, Taoism, and existential questioning. I struggle with rating this game.
I understand. I really do.
Because on one hand, it's, playing it is very different to me than bouncing off of it as a springboard into the full lectures of Alan Watts or the discussions of things like Zen and Eastern culture beliefs. So it's very difficult for me to rate it. I guess I sit somewhere around a 7.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is as arbitrary as these numbers are going to get in this episode, truly.
And to be honest, that's why my disclaimer was the way that it was at the beginning, because it's hard. I said, if you're here to listen to us talk about a game, I don't want to say reconsider, because we will talk about the game, but really this is, have you heard of Omega Mart?
No, it sounds like a Simpsons riff on Walmart.
It's an what's the word I'm looking for? It's an art installation of sorts that they basically they took a Kmart style store and they turned it into this like metaphysical, I don't want to say nightmare scenario, but like fever dream grocery store kind of thing. And if you're like judging it as a piece of art, well, like, somebody might say, well, this isn't art, but like it is. It's an experience more than it's just something you stare at. You know what I mean? And I know that this is kind of, hard to grasp and even talk about in some ways, but it's really something that you like go through and you like go down the aisles of this store. You can't buy anything. All of this to say, I understand why it's hard to give a numerical value to this game, because the goal is not to be a game.
Right. It almost doesn't make sense to assign it 1. It almost goes against the thesis of this game to do so. And I know I've tried to weasel my way out of assigning a number before, because as I say all the time, the numbers aren't the meat of it. That's just a little teaser until we actually talk about it. But if ever an episode did not require a number rating, it's this one, certainly.
It is. I agree wholeheartedly.
But enough about how I feel. Let me hear your one sentence.
This one actually ended up being 3 for me. So here we go. Everything is, and I have that capitalized, is a unique expression pairing ambient music with an overall fascinating concept of connecting everything. There are many aspects of the game that are beautiful and many forgivable errors, and at the same time it feels as though it may have been trying too hard. All in all, it's a great game, worth a go through, but you must be in the right state of mind to truly enjoy. I give it a 7 out of 10 as well, to be honest.
Yeah, it sits right around there. There's plenty of critical reviews that go both ways, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Before, I mean, this is going to get into some objectively serious, well, actually, that's not even the right phrase, because I think we could call a lot of this trivial in the grand scheme of things. But this is going to get into some areas that are, heady, I think is a good descriptor. So before we do that, I wanted to talk about some of the sillier aspects of this game, just as a little dip your toes in the pool kind of thing.
Yeah, because it's not going to be silly moving forward. No, it'll still be, we'll still have some lighthearted moments.
I mean, and this ties into my personal history with the game. I first saw this game in a Donkey video. We talk about video game Donkey all the time. I mentioned in the episode on Lisa that I think that one of Donkey's strengths is taking a game that is about something, or taking a game that has more to it than one might initially surmise, and sort of boiling it down into some comedy or some other things that might intrigue somebody to go out and buy it. So in the case of Lisa, he shows all the irreverent and funny bits, and then you play the game and you realize, oh, this is not that game. And he does a similar thing to everything, with everything.
Yeah. And Undertale and Breath of the Wild. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Undertale's another good example. With everything, he included it in one of his like montage videos. And of course, it was just all the animations, the goofiness where you can be anything from a pool table to like a gun.
To ragweed pollen, yes.
And of course, the animations, how some of the animals move. So what was your favorite thing, or what was the thing that you were able to be that made you laugh or gasp the most?
I was going to say there's a difference between my favorite thing and the thing that made me laugh the most. I was in shock and in awe of a lot of the things that I could become. I think the thing that just made me laugh the most was what basically any like quadruped mammal walked, like any of monkeys, gorillas, elephants, wolves, horses. That just I did admittedly laugh at that for a while. How about you?
Yeah, the walking animation I think is what immediately grabs most people, because the way as has been alluded to, you can be, well, everything, but you could be a bunch of animals. You could be monkeys, bears, tigers, lions, goats, anything like that. And they're animated in such a way, and we can maybe talk about why in the development, they're animated in such a way that they're constantly just standing on all fours, and each movement gets one frame, and each movement is a 90-degree rotation. So they're standing on all fours. One frame later, they've rotated onto their head. One frame later, they've rotated onto their back. One frame later, they've rotated onto their ass. And then one frame later, they're back to where they started. And it's very comical to see. It's laugh out loud funny the first time you see it.
They don't do what you expect or what you think they should do. And there's a number of animals in the game and they move differently, but like they just picked certain avatars to just rotate 90 degrees. And that's when it gets really funny to me. It's like, I don't want to give away too much, but there are other things that move the same way that really don't necessarily need to, but it just makes it funnier. Unless you want me to share it now.
It's your call.
It's the banana.
I don't think I got to be the banana.
When I saw the banana and the banana moving in a tribe of bananas, it moved the same.
We'll talk about that too.
Yeah, that's a whole thing for later. So it's funny.
I think some of the things that I really enjoyed seeing that you could be a French horn that just honks as you're going. I got to be an oil spill, just an oil spill. What's some other good ones? I mentioned a gun. You could be a
hot
gun.
Air balloon. You could be a hot air balloon. You could be kelp.
You could be a fence. It's really that kind of game. Like if you think of it, there's a very good chance that it's in this game.
When your parents told you can be anything. Well, buy this game and you can be anything. Which, by the way, can we just talk about buying this game and about the fact? And this was I meant to lead in with this as the icebreaker, but this game was on sale on 4/20, and how appropriate.
Yeah, I think it was on sale for Earth Week, is what they were saying.
Yeah, but it ended on.
Yeah, no, it's very much that kind of game. I remember the first time that I played this with a group of friends. We all had smoked a little bit and we were playing this, and it's very much that kind of a game. It's not a stressful button masher like Call of Duty or Smash Bros. And it doesn't have an overarching story. The way this game articulates is you are very much just existing in the world, and occasionally you'll get punctuations of lectures by Alan Watts. We'll talk about him in detail later, and they last anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes. And that's the impetus of the game. That's really what it is.
That's kind of it, yeah. I mean, that's not it, but like it's it,
We say face facts. We talk about encounters with reality, as if it was a head-on meeting of completely alien agencies. And the average person has the sensation that he is a somewhat that exists inside a bag of skin, a center of consciousness, which looks out at this thing and what the hell's it going to do to me? I recognize you. You kind of look like me, and I've seen myself in a mirror, and you look like you might be people. So maybe you're intelligent, maybe you can love too. And perhaps you're all right. Some of you are anyway. You've got the right color of skin, or you have the right religion, or whatever it is, you're okay. But there are all those people over in Asia, Africa, and they may not really be people. When you want to destroy someone, you always define them as unpeople.
So one thing that I have in my notes that I wanted to sort of lead off with was how does one approach this game? As a player and as a reviewer, how do you approach it?
Have you played the game Doodle God by chance?
No, I haven't.
It was one of those old Flash games where you combine, like you start off with an element, and that element is like water. And then you activate the water, and the water turns into the ocean, and it turns into, eventually like lightning becomes an option. You combine lightning and water, and you do basically it's the Miller and Urey experiment, where the proteins, the building blocks of life, start to form, and you have all these different things you can create. If you are going into this game the same way that you're going into an Ocarina of Time, you're going to be disappointed. If you're looking for a Rocket League kind of thing, where it's about points, you're going to be disappointed. This is a game that is far more y-axis than it is x-axis or z-axis. So you have to be ready for limited controls, but with an open mind. And if you have this scientific, artistic mindset as you go into this, and more of a curiosity kind of vibe, it's a lot more enjoyable. But if you're looking for game, it's not that, and that's okay.
Right. We've talked before about managing expectations, and this is a perfect example of that. I was thinking about music, and specifically sort of the Romantic era, when the arguments between programmatic music and music concrete were being tossed around by folks like Wagner, Berlioz, Chopin, Liszt, and so on. And, if we translate that into video games, programmatic video games, or video game concrete, if you want to directly translate it.
I like this.
Something like Majora's Mask is going to be closer to video game concrete. It tells its own story. It is a video game. Or to even simplify it further, something like Rocket League or Smash Bros.
Sure.
It is not making a grand statement. It's not about anything. It's just a game. It's a game. And that would be the example of video game concrete. Programmatic video games, if we're sticking to the analogy, would be about something. And this is definitively that, right? It's about something.
I would agree wholeheartedly. Yes, I think that a lot of games are a beautiful blend of both.
Oh, for sure.
Undoubtedly, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And when they were getting very black and white about it, like with, I know Wagner was, and then I always get it mixed up if it was Liszt or Chopin, because piano, I just put them together in my head. I think it was Liszt. But, when they were black and white about it, I don't think that makes sense, because as you said, most things are a blend of both. And this game is too, to an extent. If you wanted to categorize it, this is a walking sim with collectathon elements.
That's a good way of putting it. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people will look at like Duraflay, just to throw another composer into the mix here. A lot of people look at a Duraflay and say, oh, he was such a late romantic. And then there are other people who say, well, no, technically he was a modernist. And then there are other people who say, well, he was the last impressionist. What are you talking about?
There's actually a quote, an excerpt that Alan Watts talks about in one of the lectures. We'll talk about that here pretty soon. But he talks about the clumsiness of words.
Because the vehicle of words is a very clumsy one. And when you try to talk about the processes of nature, what is complicated is not the processes of nature, but trying to put them into words. That's as complicated as trying to drink up the ocean with a fork. It takes forever. And so this intense complexity that we see in everything is created by our attempt to analyze it all
in human life. And that resonates with me very deeply. You know, I forget if it was on the show or in the Discord, and I was saying that, you know, genre doesn't matter. And somebody was like, actually it does. And I was like, that's great. I don't argue on the internet anymore. That's just something that I don't do.
I'm going to argue right now. Sorry, keep going.
But this is very much that. Like, words are just that. They're just words, and there's an inherent clumsiness to them. And there always will be, especially when describing things that are so organic and experiential as life. And I think that applies to this game too. When I said that it was a collectathon, I should have elaborated on that. The way this game works is you get to act as, you start as, what do you start as, a horse? A goat?
I think, so I played it and watched it, and I think I started as a black bear. The video I watched started as a horse. Now, if I started as a horse and just blocked that from my memory, forgive me, Internet, but if you'd like to argue with me, bring it on.
Yeah, we try not to bring up horses around Ben on account of the war.
A horse walks into a bar. The bartender says, "Why the long face?" And the horse, not understanding English, kicks over a table and a couple bar stools and leaves. Hey.
That's the kind of absurdity that we need to bring to this episode. So let's talk a little bit about the development of this game.
Let's. Can I start with something that I really liked from a developmental standpoint?
Oh yeah, by all means.
And usually this is pretty out of order, but I really enjoyed the music in this.
It was appropriate.
I thought it was very appropriate. We've got Ben Lucas Boysen. What does it have another name? Also known by his stage name, Heck. He's based in Berlin. And then there's Sebastian, I don't know if this is Plano or Plano, who's from Argentina. It's very atmospheric music. It really lets you dive into everything, but
Yeah. There's a lot of planing. If you're familiar with music theory terms, there's planing of harmonies. It's almost as if you took a popular minimalist composer like Philip Glass and slowed it down by 50%.
It's a great way of putting it. Very minimalist.
It also feels, I don't know if this is accurate, but it feels very improvisatory. Like there's not specifically written sheet music, and it's more so, well, there would be, but it's there are performers improvising around it. I don't know if that is true, but it feels that way to me.
I would agree. I think that's safe. I think that's fair. Anyway, sorry to jump and put music first. That's the thing that's still playing in my head, you know?
No, it's totally fine. This game was developed by artist David O'Reilly and published by Double Fine Productions. It released on PS4, Windows, Mac, and Linux, if you're into that sort of thing, in 2017, March of 2017, and April. March for PlayStation 4, April for all things computer. And then it came to the Nintendo Switch at the beginning of 2019 in January.
I would not play this game on the Switch. If you are listening, please do not buy this game on the Switch. I don't think it would translate as well.
Yeah, there's...
I mean, it could, right?
I mean, it will certainly run well. I mean, let's get that out of the way.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it will.
Not a difficult game to run. It's more so there's an inherent lack of immersion playing something in portable mode, at least IMO.
No, you're right. You're right.
Or at the very least, we could say you just need a big screen to really appreciate what's going on here.
If I might be so bold to say, if you have played this game twice, kudos to you. But generally, this, in my opinion, is a one-timer. So, like, make sure that you're ready for it, you know?
That's interesting. That goes directly against the quote-unquote ending of the game.
Oh, I know it does. But it never really ends, does it, Rick?
So David O'Reilly, we mentioned he's an Irish artist. He developed another previous game called Mountain. Have you heard of this game?
I'd heard of Mountain, but I don't really know anything about it.
It kind of lives in between a video game and a screensaver, where it's not really meant to be played. It's just supposed to be up, and you notice humorous interactions and humorous texts about what the mountain is saying, thinking, or feeling. It's that sort of meta light kind of game. And that some of that came into everything as well. A lot of this game, when you're walking around as whatever you might be, you'll be able to talk to cows and rocks and trees and grass and bugs. And they've got some sometimes just outright funny things to say. Some of them are humorous and kind of a wink and a nod towards the game's theme, like, try thinking out, just don't take it too seriously. And then there are some things that are just outright funny, like a rock will tell you that he's the most handsome rock in the entire world, or something to that effect.
Oh yeah, no, it's absurd, some of the things that the things say to you, but it does make it all the funnier.
Yeah, definitely some influence from his previous work there. But this game, when it came out, and even to this day, it gets reviewed all over the place, as one might expect.
Yes, it does. And if you'd like me to go over some of the reception, I would be happy to be that person.
Yeah, you don't need to ask my permission, buddy.
No, it's all right. Well, I just, you were just talking about it, and I thought, I just want to make sure that we're going there. Polygon said something interesting about this game that was generally favorable, but I thought it was interesting. And again, this is going to be so much philosophy mixed in with the game just constantly throughout it. There's not going to be a hard barrier between the two, I don't believe. But they said it is a, quote, magical playpen of being rather than doing, which I thought was kind of beautiful. And it's true. In terms of how it was received on a, quote, score front, Metacritic was kind of all over the place depending on the system. PlayStation 4 was an 80. What do we have here? The computer was 78. I always found that interesting. The Nintendo Switch, it got a 71, which tracks with what we're saying. But then just kind of jumping around a little bit, Game Informer gave it an 8.5 out of 10. Nintendo World Report gave it a 5.5 out of 10. Polygon gave it a 9 out of 10. PC Gamer US gave it an 80 out of 100. Videogamer.com, I've never heard of that, gave it a 5 out of 10.
That sounds fake.
It does sound fake. I mean, but there are a lot of fake. This is an anti-misinformation podcast, everybody. So please be careful of who you're getting your medical information and your video game reviews from. Scores all over the place. All over the place for this game, which I think is why I landed on a 7. Because I think that a 5, if you're playing it to be a game, it's a 5. If you're playing it for an experience, it could be higher than a 7.
Yeah, definitely. And I think playing it as an experience is probably the best way to enjoy this game, but telling you the best way to enjoy this game is directly against the message of this game. So here we are. Yeah. So in terms of looks, this game, I mean, how would you describe the looks? It looks very much like a Source Engine project. I don't remember if we had mentioned, but it was built in the Unity engine, and it really looks like a project that would have come out of something like that. You know, and that's not a dig. I'm not criticizing the way it looks, because I think it looks appropriate. The juxtaposition of the themes of the game, the thematic material, that being questions of being, questions of why, and things like that, juxtaposed with the silliness of the animations, the quips, and the somewhat unpolished look of the game, they work together harmoniously in such a way that just works. Like if this looked hyper realistic, I don't think it would work as well, weirdly enough.
No, I agree. The humor marries the appearance of this game. If the game tried to be any funnier, I think the game would just full on be a joke. I think that the humor is dry enough, it's quippy enough. It's sort of like how I feel about Star Wars Episode 8. Sometimes it's like it felt like Marvel humor was pushed into a Star Wars movie. Marvel humor is great in Marvel movies. And Star Wars humor is great in Star Wars movies. This game's humor is very well balanced for what this game is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm glad they didn't try to be more in your face with it. That's how I always associate Marvel humor, is just really shoving the joke in your face. Like, do you get it? This is funny. You should laugh here.
Yeah, they kind of
think
give
that's
you
what
the
turns me
time to
off of
laugh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's everything but the sign that just flashes that says laugh.
Please clap.
Yeah, please clap. So we've sort of gone over what this game looks like, what it's about. Let's talk about physically how you play it. It's a walking sim. You're moving around, and sort of there's not really a clear goal of the game, but the game does guide you as you're walking around interacting with things. It starts to give you little nudges. It'll say, like, you can press the left shift button to move a little faster. You can press space bar, which if there's one mechanic in this game that I think they should have not put in, it's the shift key. I don't think you should be able to sprint because it turns it into a different kind of game. But I can... Yeah, I mean, that's just my opinion.
I know what you mean, but I also wonder if it would be too laborious, but that's neither here nor there, really.
Oh, that's the thing. I think it was a concession for the masses, you know. I think more people would be bothered by it not being there than would be bothered by its presence, you know. But the game will give you sort of nudges, and it'll say, like, press the space bar and you can sing. That's one of your major verbs, is you can sing. Now, that translates just to making noise, really, because, I mean, ultimately that's what music and singing is. It's just making structured noise. Doesn't even need to be structured, actually. But it's quite funny because, you know, if you're a cow, you're going to moo, and that's funny. If you're something that you might not expect makes noise, like if you're rock, you could be rocks. Not Dwayne, but like physical rocks.
Right.
You know, if you're Dwayne and you press the keyboard or the space key, you just start shouting, "Do you smell what the rock's cooking?"
Absolutely, thank you.
Or every time you press the space key, you just hear, "Say my motherfucking name."
I was gonna say, how many rocks do we want to throw in here?
When you are rocks, boulders, and you press the space key, you hear like the tumbling of boulders. When you're a fence and you press the space key, you hear the creaking of wood. When you're an atom, ATOM, you hear, I don't even know how to describe it. You hear sound effects. But everything sings.
Blibbly
Everything
bloops.
makes a noise. Yeah, bleep bloops.
Well, and this, you know, it kind of goes with the musical proto-language hypothesis that Darwin put forth, right? It's like everything sings, everything has the ability to communicate. And I love that that's between, you know, both living things and inanimate objects, or at least what we call inanimate objects. It's really beautiful. Really quite beautiful. And I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that plays into another major theme of the game that we didn't talk about, and that is this notion of unity, this notion of everything being of each other. There's that famous, I think, Carl Sagan quote talking about how we're all just star stuff.
Yes,
and it's the same notion. As we'll talk about in the game, they show you that pretty explicitly. But everything is itself. Everything is related. Singing. So that's singing. that's
spacebar, right? That's spacebar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You learn another verb, which is dancing. And dancing is exactly how it sounds. Well, yeah, it's also the polite word for fucking.
Oh my God.
Because that's, if you walk up to a like animal, at first it has to be the same animal, or, you know, the same thing, whether you're a tree, boulder, atom, whatever. At first it has to be the same. And when you go up to a similar thing and you press, I don't know, I think it's the V button, the V
It
key
is
or
V.
something.
That's another button.
You it is V, and that is a button. When you press that button, it you kind of form a little crew, a little posse. And you can, I don't know what the limit is. You could form quite a big circle, quite a big group.
I've seen
And then
ungodly things.
you press another button and you're able to dance. And when you're dancing, you have this little compass at the top that fills up. And when it fills up, you press X, you birth a new thing. Now, it happens with life. I mean, you birth a new cow, you birth a new horse, but it also happens with soda cans and billboard tables. Like, everything will birth something, which is it's that little flirting with irreverence and flirting with absurdity that this game does well. It never crosses that line that I like quite a bit.
It's perfect.
It's very funny to have like a group of baseball bats and birth a new baseball bat. It's very funny.
It is hilarious, and it knows it's not taking itself too seriously.
But these are sort of the minor verbs of the game. There are two major verbs that I'm going to volley it to you to talk about, Ben, and that is ascension and descension. These are the big boy verbs.
These are the big boy verbs, and with mouse and keyboard, it depends on which side of the mouse you're using to ascend and descend. This actually features one of my favorite parts of the entire game. I did find ascension and descension to be, quote, neat, as my dad would say. Golly. Yeah, it's... So let's just say you start off as the horse, okay? Let's just say. And you're going about, and you meet other horses, and you can all neigh together and run through a field. And by run through a field, we mean rotate it at like 90-degree angles over and over in the equivalent of a T-pose for the horse. There comes a point where you are given the option to ascend or descend. Rather, I think you start by descending. I think you start with descending. Which is to say that you go into a different life form. So like you start off as a horse and you're running around a field and you can descend into the grass, and then you will move around as a blade of grass, and the grass, or a patch of grass. The grass can move, which, is special, but the grass, it leaves a trail. It kind of disappears behind itself. From the grass, you can descend further into dirt, into seeds, into... I mean, Rick, you got to the atomic level. You can go that low. And on the other side of things, you can ascend, and I know we'll be going over a lot of the stuff we can do, but let's say we're at the horse again. You can ascend into the trees, into the continents, into the planets, into the solar system.
Yes, and I want to put a pin in that for 1 second.
Please.
So when we say ascend and descend, there's both capital A and capital D, ascend and descend, but there's also just regular ascend and descend. So like if you're a horse, a regular descend might be from horse to cat, or from horse to small boulder. A regular ascend would be like horse to big tree. But there's also, if you press left or right click respectively, you might also get a prompt to ascend or descend. It'll tell you that. And if you take that prompt, that's when you sort of change that playing field. So you go from the world of horses, cats, and all that, down to the world of grass and seeds and scorpions, and so on.
It's an important distinction. Can I talk about my favorite thing with ascending? Can I talk about my favorite thing?
Please, yeah.
My favorite thing. Okay, so you ascend, okay, let's say that you're a tree, okay. Everyone fasten your seatbelts. Everyone grab a cup of tea. Everyone just close your eyes. And let's say that we start off as that tree. Then we ascend into the continent, okay? Then we ascend further and we become the planet, okay? And then we ascend further into the sun. You can do that. It's a little bit more, similar size by comparison in a lot of weird ways. Then you can ascend into a galaxy. And then you can ascend further into like quarks and like Planck straits and all these other sort of strange things. When you ascend from something, quote, larger than a galaxy, when you ascend, you become argon, or you become hydrogen. And I love that.
That was the pin.
So much.
That was the pin that I had put in. The way that the game shows it to you is descending. So you descend once you're an atom. If you keep descending, then you become the mathematical concepts, right? Like you're just vibrating shapes. I think that's what you're called, a vibrating shape. And if you descend further, then all of a sudden you are an enormous universe and then a galaxy. And it's hammering in this fact, one of the themes of the game, that everything is, as we've said, everything is of each other. We are all made of star stuff. Do you find that effective? Judging by the way that you're talking about it, I think you find it effective, but do you?
I do, and I don't find it unironic either, because I'm somebody who has a belief in a lot of things that are beyond explanation, because who am I to limit what this universe has, what one, depending on what your faith background is, I don't think anyone should ever limit what their, quote, creator has done, because my God, would they be boring otherwise. It's just a whole galaxy existing within a seed, more or less. Because of course it does. It has to. Ugh. Tell me your thoughts on all this.
It's an interesting concept, and I think I agree with it largely. I don't think the beliefs that everything is of each other and the belief that we are insignificant in the large scale, I don't think they need to be divorced or mutually exclusive. I have always very firmly believed that, as humans, we are animals, and that's that. That's just what we are, and we live for a blip, and then we pass. And what's after that, well, God only knows. Most of us don't like to think about it, or we create beliefs that sort of quell that anxiety, and that's fine. I don't think that sort of animalistic, earthy approach to life needs to be mutually exclusive from this idea that everything is connected. Because if you want to get scientific and egghead about it, we are connected. That star stuff quote that Sagan said is talking about we are made up of the same molecular particles, right? There is hydrogen in all of us. There is carbon in all of us, as there is carbon in the universe, in the stars and the planets.
And we are made up of that stuff, and though we are a shape, like a whirlpool is a shape, the whirlpool is not the water necessarily. I feel a segue coming on, everybody.
Oh, do you?
I do. I feel, unless you want to talk more about ascending and descending, the person who I feel is responsible for holding our hands through this game, and I loved this, if we may, is Alan Watts. Loved
Alan
it.
Watts.
But the way we feel and sense our existence, being based on a myth that we are made, that we are parts, that we are things, our consciousness has been influenced so that each one of us does not feel that. We feel we have been hypnotized, literally hypnotized, by social convention into feeling and sensing that we exist only inside our skins, that we are not the original bang, but just something out on the end of it. And therefore we are scared stiff. Because my wave is going to disappear. And I'm going to die. And that would be awful.
So, did you know about Alan Watts prior to this game?
I had known of him, but I didn't study him at length. Like, I've done a fair amount of research into, the religious studies and into, a number of philosophies and so forth. But I was not really, I knew of him more, How about you?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I knew the name. I knew his general vibe. God, I hate reducing Alan Watts and his studies and lectures to his vibe. But and I'm gonna put a pin in that too because I want to come back to Gen Z terminology. I thought of this earlier today, but
Okay.
This game prompted me to listen to more Alan Watts lectures, and this is the single greatest thing this game has given me.
Yeah.
I have spent so much time with Alan Watts and his lectures on YouTube over the past week, and it has been nothing short of refreshing and rejuvenating. And he talks about a lot of different things, but how he categorized himself, and I'm gonna consult my notes just to make sure that I'm getting this correctly, as a philosophical entertainer.
Yes, that sounds correct.
And it really does too. I've heard him said, I looked around, I poked around on the internet because, when you find entertaining folks talking about anything, like the viral YouTube accounts that are about saxophone or the viral bands or what have you, you're going to find experts in those fields that say like they're hacks, they're just, they got lucky and that's why people know them, or they've got a good voice or something. What I've generally found of Alan Watts is that most people that are into the Zen and the Buddhist and the Taoist belief systems, they see him as largely positive. He was largely additive and as a bridge for Westerners to approach these Eastern thoughts. And I think that's beautiful. There's there is a story, an anecdote that I read of Alan Watts. One thing about him was that he had a penchant for the drink, and he actually ended up dying. Yes, he ended up dying of alcoholism. And during one of his stints where he was living and teaching in the East, he was, I guess, he was with with apologies to folks in the know. I don't know the terminology. He was with a Zen teacher, somebody who teaches Zen and has students teaching them of that belief path or of the Buddhist belief system. And the master, one of his students, and Alan Watts were all sitting in the evening talking, and Alan Watts was spinning his prose and getting, for lack of a better word, shit-faced. And the next day, the student said something to the effect of, we thought he was so profound before, Alan Watts, but now that we've seen the real thing, we are so disappointed. And the master said angrily, "You fool, you misunderstand Alan Watts entirely." And I love that because, I love that partly because it shows that alcoholism does not detract from brilliance, and addiction does not detract from brilliance. That's a ridiculous notion.
And it's, when people are like, oh, they just put it down. Okay, let's talk about the fact that these are actually diseases at the end of the day before we just lump somebody into it's just a bad decision. Hold on. Hold on, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I like that anecdote though.
It's a great one.
It's very good. Do you have a particular lecture or, even a line, even a couplet of Watts that you particularly like?
In this game in particular?
Yes, or just in general, because there are a few that I wrote down here that I was hoping that you and I could parse out.
I'd love to talk about what you found. I've not had the time, unfortunately, this week to listen to him separate from the game. But within the game, I like the parts of the lectures. There were two in particular that really kind of smacked me in a way that was pleasant. I love when he goes on about, like, there are no nouns in the physical world. A noun is a part of speech. You are a person, therefore you people. And he talks about everything is wiggling constantly. I did love the whirlpool anecdote when he says a whirlpool is just that, but it's not the same water. Just like you. You are made up of star stuff. You are constantly made up of rays and light and all sorts of things that are constantly like fluctuating in and out of you. And then the last one, and then I want to hear any and everything that you have, which is we know what someone is by what they do. And then going on to say, I don't exist without you, and nor you without me.
His whole impetus in the snippets that they took for this game is this notion that, again, everything is of each other. It really is a what's the opposite of focus? It's not a blurring, but it's a de-emphasization of the ego and the self and the I. And it pushes the focus into a more grounded state of being. They took, by the way, for this game, they worked with the Alan Watts estate because apparently everybody wants to use Alan Watts for voiceovers and stuff.
I'm not surprised. He's got a great voice for it.
I'm not either. He's got this it's such a smooth baritone transatlantic sort of accent.
He's quite the orator. The game is worth listening to him alone, honestly.
It truly is. And if you don't want to do that, somebody uploaded a 30-minute video of all of the lectures put together. There are snippets from 12 or so different lectures in this game. One of the first lines that you come across from him is him saying it's difficult to pinpoint what this lecture is about because it's so fundamental to everything. That's kind of how this begins, which is, haha, they said, like pointing at the screen, that's the name of the movie.
That's the game! We know this!
Adjacent to that anecdote where he talks about, a tree that produces apples being a verb, a world that produces peoples, he says, we say we came into this world, but you didn't. You came out of it.
I loved that one.
So let's say the tree which grows apples is a tree which apples, using apple as a verb. And a world in which human beings arrive is a world that peoples. And so the existence of people is symptomatic of the kind of universe we live in. Just as hair on a head is symptomatic of what's going on in the organism. But we have been brought up not to feel that we belong in the world. So our popular speech reflects it. We say, I came into this world. You didn't. You came out of it. We say, face facts. We talk about encounters with reality, as if it was a head-on meeting of completely alien agencies, and the average person has the sensation that he is a somewhat that exists inside a bag of skin, a center of consciousness, which looks out at this thing, and what the hell's it going to do to me?
To me, this whole thing is a de-emphasization of the ego, as I said. It's this shifting the focus from the I and shifting the focus back into the all. We are no longer staring straight into the pointillistic painting at 1 or 2 pixels. We're moving back. We're seeing the big picture. And this is the pin that I put in earlier about Gen Z culture that got me thinking about this is there's Gen Z kids have developed it's not a new phrase, but they've brought back into parlance this idea of being the main character or having main character energy. And it's used oftentimes as, not always as a dig, but it's sort of like, it's never a compliment. If somebody's having a freak out in the local gas station, they'll say like, oh, they think they're the main character. Or I don't know, if you're having a particularly good day and you want to celebrate it because this is all about you, then you say, I've got big main character energy today. And what I like about this is it's Gen Z sort of highlighting how silly that notion can be. And although the parlance is main character, it's really this idea of self, of ego. It's Gen Z collectively as a new forefront of our culture saying that this notion of enlarged ego and self-importance is silly. It's silly. And I love that. I love this. I love that juxtaposition of the upcoming generation realizing this, because ever since Ronald Reagan and the spawn of neoliberalism, shout out to our worst president ever.
Oh my gosh.
Ever since that, there has been this pervasive notion in the West of this focus on the I, like I need to succeed, capitalism, me. It's very self-focused and self-centric. I need to succeed. If you don't succeed, it is your fault.
You're exactly right. And at one point, a news source tried to blame this on Mr. Fred Rogers, saying that everyone was special. And you can guess the news source because they're on basically any television that you can get your hands on. And they're wrong about a lot of things in a concerning way. In a really concerning way. Anyhow, but they try to say Mr. Rogers was an evil man. And I was like, I think you're mistaking that man with the guy who has really created more monopolies than anybody else on God's earth by saying, let's just deregulate. Sorry, keep going.
No, it's totally fine. You are right. Fox was way off base with that. They're
what?
also
I didn't
not
say
news.
that. I didn't say Fox News. Who said Fox News?
I did. I'll jump on that. But ever since that era, it has been very self-focused, and I think that has been largely detrimental as a culture. I don't think that it's all bad. I think focusing on the self is often important. You can't take care of others if you do not take care of yourself. But I just fucking love Gen Z sort of pointing a finger at that and being like, that energy, that sort of self-importance, after a point is silly. And we are making fun of you for it. And I love that. And I love that this game is made me think of that. I love that we're starting in the West, more so than before, to move away from that and to take a more holistic approach to things. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and the game actually has a way of making you feel small, and not like insignificant, but rather, wow, I am / all of these things / I never thought that the button that fell off of my jacket had such a significance. But that's what the game does. I mean, it makes everything more significant and less significant, and makes the unity all the more important. I agree with that entirely. Yeah, and that's really funny about the main character energy, because you're right. Self-care and taking care of yourself and stepping back and doing what you need to do to be a human being, not a human doing. Dr. Michael King and everybody. He was the first person I'd heard who said that. He was a professor of percussion at the school that Rick and I attended. It's important to be and to slow down and to be part of the group rather than just, I don't know. Ambitions are good, but being an asshole isn't, you know?
Yeah. Do you have any other excerpts that stood out to you, or even just one-liners?
Just really the stuff that you were just immediately starting to strike on it all. Those three in particular were the ones that really got me, though a lot of them made me scratch my chin. Those were the three I wrote down.
He talks at one point about this comparison of, there's this notion that we think that either the world is happening to us, cold and mechanical, we are alone in the universe, and then we die, and being a child of God, a God who is watching over you to make sure that you are in line. And he comments that both of these are equal in the sense that they give you a feeling that you do not belong.
I remember that. That was later on, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a bit later. What do you make of this? Do you want to, let's parse this out a little bit, because that's a very profound thing to say. That is particularly that children of God, as many think of themselves, equate to not belonging in this whole thing, because there is a creator that's wagging his finger, especially if you're part of perhaps the Southern Baptist or Catholic tradition, wagging his finger at you saying, no, 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 you are either good or bad. I must keep you in line. It's a very interesting thought, and you are more of a religious scholar than I am. And I was very excited to talk with you about this.
I'm thrilled that I'd forgotten that happened, but I'd only actually seen it today because that's the point I was at. So I'm going to say this as diplomatically, and I'm going to speak about myself and my own experiences and interpretation of everything as best I can. So I want to start with that trigger warning. I am going to go off a little bit here, and that's not to go after anyone. These are just some thoughts, because this is heavy material. You know what I mean? Like, this is not just we're not talking about Diddy Kong Racing anymore, everybody. So, like, there are some... I respect a lot of people who are atheists because they have come to that conclusion. And that is their relationship with their existence. That is fine. Like, literally zero issue. I'm not going to evangelize you. Full stop. I respect people who have a good relationship with their creator. There are air quotes floating, whoever that might be. The notion... I think it's George Carlin who talks about how there's this God who, like, judges you and wags his finger and will, curse you to eternal damnation if you, step outside of the lines of his rules, even for a fleeting moment, quote, but he loves you, end quote.
Yeah.
It is hilarious. I as somebody who believes in a higher power at the least, both are so wrong to me, because I think that there's some people that believe that it's mechanical because they take comfort in it in a way like, well, at least I can hold on to my facts. And if everything goes dark, well, then I'm going to pretend that I'm okay through this, when at the end of the day, they're actually not. If you can make peace with the fact that it might just go dark and that's okay, then that's okay. But if you're not, I don't know. And the idea that there's a God that is pulling strings and wagging fingers, that gets a little bit... I don't think it's our job to try to define higher powers. In fact, I think that's actually rather blasphemous, whenever people say, oh, that's God's will. I'm sorry, who's God? Yours or mine? Because it sounds like we're talking about different people. By that measure, call me a polytheist. What are your thoughts?
I'm reminded of a quote or a notion or a general feeling that I cannot remember from where I heard it. But it was saying something along the lines of finding God is something done within, not without. There is no external man in the sky. There is no external force in the heavens wagging down. Certainly not a white guy with a big beard either. Let's get that clear. I think it's interesting, Ben. I think both sides of the spectrum, the side that says, well, it's God's will, so I can't fight it. He decides for me. And the other side that says everything is cold and mechanical and there's nothing I can do to stop this. It's inevitable. I think they're both sort of coping mechanisms.
I think, exactly.
And I think coping is perhaps too strong, and also derogatory in a way. There is built-in self-reassurance to both.
I think they're both
varying degrees.
I agree. I think they're both fear-driven, and I apologize. I was not trying to cut you off.
No, you're totally fine. That's what, baby. This is the internet age on Zoom. We're cutting each other off all the time.
I'm gonna find something else to wait. That doesn't sound right. No, I think I know what you mean whenever you say that coping mechanism might not be fair, but like I think that there are people who just say, okay, well this is. So I want to tell a few familial stories about people that I love and respect. My Aunt Diane, her husband, my Uncle Gordon, who I never met, died of a heart attack in the 80s while he was running on the track. He was literally taking care of his body. And someone said, oh, Diane, I'm so sorry. It must have been God's will. And she literally looked at this person and said, not my God. Keep in mind that Gordon was the son of a Presbyterian minister. So You're not going to mess with Aunt Diane on this one. Full stop. And then there's my Aunt Nancy's partner, Rajiv. And Rajiv once said, and this is kind of where I align myself with a lot of things, and he said it, and I was like, Rajiv? He just said, and it was so simple and in passing, and he just said, I don't think God is limited to one person in one time. I think that God has presented themselves to different people in different generations in a form that was understandable to them, and in a way which, is sort of a God within sort of thing, but it's also like a God present in the Christ, in Muhammad, in Abraham, in Moses, in Melchizedek, in Siddhartha Gautama, in the authors of the Vedas. Pick one, you know what I mean? In us, for goodness sake. Like we connectivity, right? Like, let's just stay with this theme in the game. I don't know.
I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of folks tend to misunderstand what... I don't want to say they misunderstand religion, because that's another topic entirely. And what is the difference between religion and organized religion? Spoiler alert, there's a lot of them. But
You're right.
I think a lot of folks, when they talk about their belief in God or hear about others' belief in God, think of it as much more concrete than perhaps they should, and perhaps many of us do. I couldn't agree more with your relatives or with your take that it's more complicated and it's more ubiquitous and it's more within all than it is somebody enacting their will to bring home, quote unquote, our family members. That's not it. It never has been.
No, and weaponizing the divine to get your way, or to say, well, this is what God wants. Okay. First of all, how do you actually know? Because let me tell you, if you're trying to speak on behalf of a force that is so powerful and should be so limitless that perhaps we are created to evolve, spoiler alert, do you really want to, if you're going to face the quote throne, do you really want to try to define them? Because there are 7 billion people on this planet, and someone's going to be wrong. And that's okay. But what do you believe?
And that's precisely it too, is that they're, when I hear people say, like, I'm going to pick on Christians for a moment, because one, they're the majority, so they can't claim to be oppressed because they're not. And spoiler alert, spoiler alert, you're not oppressed if you're a Christian. But I'm going to pick on them because
Christmas.
The bad coffee man won't say Jesus to me. I'm going to pick on them for a moment because they're the worst offenders of this. You'll have somebody like you say, I am a Christian. If you're going to make a broad statement, you're just going to say, I'm Christian. Broadly, right? As opposed to I'm Catholic, or as opposed to I am agnostic, right? You can also have somebody else say the same thing, but that other person will vehemently judge and berate folks that have premarital sex, will vehemently shout their opinions that anybody, the LGBT community, is committing a mortal sin, and it's by choice because they're blasphemers. You have people like that. I don't remember where I heard this term before, but it's not mine. I like to call them cafeteria Christians, because they pick and choose what they believe from their divine books. And when they're confronted with something that goes against what they think, like, how about the fact that King James was a homosexual? And spoiler alert, the King James Bible does not condemn homosexuality. Then they say, no, that's not true. It's my religion. I get to pick it how I believe it. Versus somebody like you, Ben, that might say, I'm a Christian. You might say that holds a more compassion-driven and, dare I say, more Christ-like view of his religion. I've gone into rambling, but
No,
you know what I mean? You said that there are 7 billion people. Somebody's got to be wrong. There are people that are simply calling themselves something to call themselves something when they don't actually align with it. And guess what? It's okay. Another sect that's kind of going in the opposite direction. Another sect that's a big offender of this are Satanists. They get worked up as hell, pardon the pun,
But it's,
if somebody online says like, hey, yeah, I'm a Satanist, but I don't really think that I probably wouldn't punch somebody if they punch me. And then somebody's going to say, well, you're going against you're going against the rules of the earth and our I don't remember the terminology yet, and I don't have any books near me that I could grab. But you're going against our core tenets, to not turn the other cheek, so you're not a Satanist. And I think anybody saying that it's ridiculous. There are 7 billion people. We are not going to fit comfortably into even hundreds of thousands religions. We're not.
So why should we try to limit any of the powers that be? Like if they exist, why should we limit them? To go back to the cafeteria Christians, which are my favorite one. Oh my goodness gracious. They're the same people that are like, talking about honor thy mother and father, and I'm like, oh, the abuser? Are we talking about? Well, I was like, well, hold on, but you also claim the Christ because Christ kind of came along, right? And he said, I'm going to reduce all of your 10 commandments into 2, which is love the Lord God with all of your might, etc., and so forth, and love your neighbors yourself. Literally reduced everything into that. And like, you have these people who are like, well, but and I'm like, okay, sorry, are you going to do the whole New Testament thing? Are you going to weave the Old Testament in ways that you are just trying to manipulate your own dialogue situation? Cannot stand it. We're also not stoning babies anymore. I'm gonna just sit back down. You've got me on a topic that I like about. Also, and then I'm out, and then I'm gonna stop. I will say, so technically I'm an Episcopalian. I did join the Episcopal Church, though I'm still in a pretty happy agnostic place overall. I will say that if by Christian you mean somebody that takes to Christ the way that Buddhists take to the Buddha, and someone who believes in the brown-skinned individual who healed everybody without charging any sort of copay, and believed in social justice, I'm your guy. But if you're talking about the blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy who was judgmental and only loves certain people, I'm out. I'm not your guy. Not a Christian by that measure.
Yeah. I think when there are this many people involved, one of two things happens. Either things like the cafeteria Christians come to be, and they choose their own form of their particular religion and get aggressive and deal with others with hostility that don't align with them, or we circle back the entire other way and sort of examine everything as one, as this game tries to get us to do. I think the former is a completely ludicrous and ridiculous idea that is not additive in any way and doesn't help and always hurts. It's frustrating because I understand why. Humans like to fit into nice categories. Being part of an in-group feels good. It just does. But the thing is that with something as personal as religion, it is not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a choose your one category and there you have it. It's so much messier than that. Speaking personally, I love the aspects of LaVeyan Satanism that are self-improvement focused, that are mind your P's and Q's, take care of yourself focused. I love the aspects of Taoism, which is not a religion, by the way. It gets called that. It is not. I'm not telling you that. I'm not telling you that. You know better than me. But I love aspects of that are Well, actually, I'm going to save that because there's something that I want to talk about that later. And I love aspects of Christianity that are, for lack of better words, socialist Jesus. Take care of those around you, right? There is not, and that's okay. It's okay to not fit nicely and snugly into any one category.
It's always been okay.
It's always been okay. You're right. Nor should we desire to do that, because that's when we get the cafeteria Christians that come out for blood. What we should do, I think, is the opposite and sort of approach it like Alan Watts tries to narrate in this game, and this game demonstrates. Everything is a part of itself. Everything is of each other. That's like the byline of this episode. And once we realize that, and once we realize how trivial it all can be when we're arguing, is it a sin for me to be attracted to that which my brain tells me I am? Once we realize how trivial and mundane at best and harmful, very harmful at worst, that can be, then I think that's when we start to reach, I have no business throwing this word around, but enlightenment.
No, I think you do have business throwing that around, and that's when we put it all down, and when we let it, not to sound like a Taoist here or anything like that, but it's because, fun fact, I very much, at least I strive to put myself in the company of that word and other Taoists. When we put it down and let it do what it's supposed to do in our lives, and just let it, flow the way it's supposed to, it gets a lot easier. And you know something? If I'm wrong about God, if I'm wrong about the divine, I look forward to them telling me face to face when I'm dead. I'm smiling a shit-eating grin. Because just people are so... How are you supposed to get into heaven? I don't know, but if I'm wrong about something, aren't they going to tell me anyway? Like... Come on.
You mentioned about 20 minutes or so ago the George Carlin bit.
Yes.
And I think another thing he mentions in that bit, for those that don't know, George Carlin, he was a comedian, but at different points throughout his tenure doing comedy, he started to get more and more focused on social critique.
Like Jon Stewart, really, in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, yeah. Yeah. One thing Carlin's...
Gruff.
What's that?
A little more gruff in some ways.
Some ways. Jon Stewart never had a list of 7 words. That's all we're going to say.
But he knew them and he abided.
One thing Carlin had mentioned is like, and I'm paraphrasing here, if the God that you worship is that damning and horrible and does not love his people and will send them to eternal damnation for minor sins, that is not a God that you want to worship. And I think he's sort of getting at the same thing that we're clumsily getting at, I think. Me more so than you, of course, but...
You are not clumsy, darling.
Taking it back to the game for a second, because we've touched on Taoism, and I realize we didn't actually get to the way the game is quote unquote beaten.
Ah, yeah. Well, and after we do that, we're basically done talking about the game.
I think there's a lot to talk about.
Sure.
We could drag this easily out into, multi-hours. Hell, especially if we were together around a fire, a couple of alcoholic beverages.
But the story is over pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll let you take it away. Because I've been talking quite a bit.
No, you're perfectly fine. And Rick, please jump in, because again, I only plan on doing this game once. There comes a point in the game, and I forget, it's through a series of dissension, is it not, whenever we end up in that kind of strange little hellscape place? Or is it it's through the Golden Gate? That's it.
So after the game, like we said, will nudge you and prompt you. Hey, press this thing. Hey, try descending. Hey, try descending even further. And now suddenly you're a galaxy. Now you're big again. It'll tell you to return to where you started to find the Golden Gate. This was an object that was actually right in front of you when you first started.
Thank you for reminding me. This I found hilarious, and this was very Taoist, which is if you stop playing the game, it will autoplay. So the more you look for the Golden Gate, in theory, the further you're getting away from it. So if you just put your controller down and just leave, you will start to strafe back toward where you're supposed to be, which is really like the beginning of the grand finale when we get to that gate.
My favorite thing about it is that the game tells you to let go. It tells you not to play, because I spent a good half hour trying to get back to this planet, and then I said, I just put it down, and all of a sudden it's guiding me back there. It's very Taoist. It made me think of the principle of the uncarved block, which is that Wu Wei?
It is Wu Wei.
Wu Wei. Benjamin Hoff. It always makes me think of that because like he Americanized it Wu by making that kind of a long vowel sound. I think it's a little sturdier in the Chinese pronunciation, closer to a Wu Wei.
Or rather, it's Pooh, I believe. P-U, not Pooh.
Oh, is that it?
Winnie the Pooh, yeah.
I gotcha. Okay, my mistake. It made me think of that. Just to completely, well, actually, do you want to, if you had to like just really bare bones meat and potatoes, what that principle is, what is that?
What Pooh is?
No, the principle
uncarved
of
block.
the uncarved block.
Gosh, I'm sitting here and I'm like, how do I even define it? It's really just simplicity, right? It's the tree that, even though it has imperfections all about it, never gets cut down. It's the fact that it's fine as it is, unforced kind of state of mind.
It's not putting square pegs into round holes. Is the one that I always go to.
No, because, when you taste vinegar and it tastes like vinegar, it's supposed to taste like vinegar. It's not supposed to taste like anything else.
Right. It's this notion that you're not forcing things into being in a state that they're not supposed to be, right? And this part of the game made me think of that. It also made me think of something, a movie scene that completely changed the way that I taught and thought. And I came to it late, and regrettably late in life. And it's from one of my favorite rom-coms, Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Have you seen this?
I saw it a long time ago. I don't remember it very well.
It's the scene where, I'm blanking on his name. Jason, what's his name? Marshall from How I Met Your Mother. What's his name?
Jason Segel.
Jason Segel. That's what it is. It's that scene where Jason Segel goes out to learn how to surf from Paul Rudd. And Paul Rudd is teaching him, and he's like, all right, you just got to lay down on the board and don't do anything. And he's like, what do you, don't do anything? He's like, just don't do it. Just let it happen. And so he lays there and he kind of pops up and he's like, you're doing too much. You're doing too much. And then he pops up a slightly different way and he's like, you're doing way too much. You're trying way too hard. And then he just lays there and doesn't do anything. He's like, well, that's not quite it either. He's like, you got to try a little harder than that. And he's like, oh, don't worry, you'll get it. But like, that's such a beautiful way of thinking. Like you can't try. Like you don't try. You just do. And I came to that very late in my teaching and my playing and my general way of thinking. But it was this bombshell revelation to me. Because most of our problems, just speaking as musicians, but also I think this is broadly applicable to life, most of our problems come from forcing square pegs into round holes, from trying far too hard and not doing the exact amount of effort required for the current situation. Do you know what I mean?
I had a therapist who once told me I shouldn't should myself.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm leaving that silence in there. I shouldn't should myself.
I mean, and that's exactly it. I'm sorry, is this something that, you're meant to do? Like, is this something that feels right? That's okay. Like, you see a swan walking, and it's like, okay, that thing kind of walks funny. But then when you see it on the water, you're like, oh, you should probably spend more time. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that it can't do that, but like, what it's really designed to do. It doesn't need to be existential. It's just, it's happening. You know what I mean? And that swan is born knowing everything it needs to know.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Another Alan Wattsism that I heard on a different lecture that's not in the game is he said something along the lines of like when a Zen practitioner is asked a philosophical question, they'll give a very simple answer. But when they're asked a very simple question, they give a very philosophical answer. And he was like, "What's for dinner tonight?" "Oh, who is asking? Who are you? Who am I?" I thought that was very funny.
That's outstanding.
So the game.
Yep.
Back to the game.
Yep.
We're in the Golden Gate. This is this game's sort of version of hell. It's this the notion is you get in there, you've been quote unquote searching for this the whole game. And inside it's this weird stream of consciousness sort of area where everything from planets to distorted animals to trumpets are just floating around. And all of them are sort of saying the same things. Like, I spent my whole life trying to get here, and this is fucking awful, and I hate it. And this is the worst. We can't get out.
This is hell.
And notably, you cannot get out. You cannot ascend from here. What you have to do, and this is probably the part of the game that tripped me up the most. I looked up how to get out of here because partly because I was on a time crunch. But you have to, there's an unknown planet that's floating around, and you descend into that. And that will eventually get you out of the game because you end up interacting with the game itself. You find a computer playing the game.
That.
Yeah, and it sort of asks you, it's like, this is what you've been searching for the whole time. Is this what you were expecting? Like, does this fulfill you? And I really loved that part.
It was the part that I was originally like, this game's going to sit a little bit lower for me. And then that scene, I was like, okay, we are ascending. Beautiful moment in the game. And I loved, so as, you interact with things, you think, you talk, etc. with these objects and animals and life forms. And you will collect thoughts and different things that everyone says, and Alan Watts isms. And the game itself tells you that you can release your thoughts. I loved that.
And that's the first step. It's kind of funny because it'll be like, press M to release your thoughts. And you press M and you start to see all of the thought bubbles that you've come across. And you release them. And that's how you get out of the Golden Gate. And you get this neat little cutscene of this like little particle of light just flying all over the world, through all different like beaches and cityscapes and fields, and there's horses and there's people and sailboats and just everything that you've encountered. You're flying all through that while this really, compared to the rest of the game, while this almost orchestral piece is playing, and you end up back where you started as another four-legged creature, and it says something to the effect of, "Congratulations, tutorial completed."
Yep.
And that comes back to it, right? Is like the implication being, now the real game begins. What is the real game? Well, being is the real game. You are the real game. There is no point. It just is.
Not playing is even the game.
Precisely so. I mean, literally, too. You don't play, the game will play for you.
Yeah. There are really no words for it. And this is kind of the end, right?
For all intents and purposes, you could stop here, and I don't think anybody would disagree if you said, yeah, I played through the game.
Agreed,
if you're a collectathon type, at this point, whenever you switch to another life form or to another thing, if you haven't already internalized it before, you immediately bond with it. I think bond is the verb that they use. We never mentioned before, but to quote unquote internalize something. So like if you switch to a brand new creature, you have to walk around a little bit before it says like thought
You
gained
are.
or whatever. Or yeah, you are. But after you beat it, you immediately bond. So if you're a collectathon type person, the new game begins, and good luck to you, because there's an intimidating amount of stuff to be.
If you really feel like just being and just kind of floating through this game, go to town. I would also encourage you to go outside and to live it. Go find a blade of grass, pick up some dirt,
and touch it. Touch the grass.
listen to what it sounds like, rub it together, and make it sing. I don't know.
Who would you recommend this game to? Let me ask, do you recommend it? And then if so, like, who would you recommend this to?
Oh my God, sorry. I don't know how I missed this when I was reading. He became an Episcopal priest because, of course, he did in 1945.
Who, Alan Watts?
Yes!
Yeah, he did.
I forgot that he left in 1950. Oh,
we could do a whole podcast on Alan Watts. He is an interesting dude.
We could. Here's the problem with this game and who I would recommend it to. The people that I would recommend it to, I don't think are people that need it. I would recommend this game to a friend like Max Esmus. I don't think Max needs this game. I don't think Max needs to play this game. I could recommend this to Troy Fichette. I don't know that Troy Fichette needs this game.
We are, for folks listening at home, we're naming personal IRL friends of ours by first and last name on the show. Welcome to it. This is Pixel Project Radio. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Oh, they're here. No, they're not with us this evening. But those are two people that I think about immediately that are friends that we both know, that would enjoy this. I think anybody who needs to slow down, anybody who wants to, if someone's having like a struggle with like, I don't want to say with reality, but like if somebody is really like thinking about significance and life forms and how everything comes together, I would recommend this game. If you're looking for an opportunity to slow down, this game, to be honest with you, playing and watching, gave me a greater appreciation for the sacred, for the sweet spot between sacred and science, that sacred geometry sort of thing, and an absolute love for the depth and vastness that is beyond our comprehension of all of those wiggling things. I would say that this is a good game. I would if you have a few hours to sit down and just play it straight through, I think is the other way I would recommend it. I wouldn't say that this is a chunks game. Not that you can't. You know what I'm saying?
It's not, and it's short enough that you can get through it in one play session even. It's what, 3 hours? It's even shorter if you know like the trick of how to get out of like the gate and how to find it. It's even shorter.
Yep.
I think at the very least, I mean, I'm with you. I think the people that would get the biggest impact out of this sort of already understand, they're on the level of what this game is after, given that it's so short and it's often very cheap.
Yes.
What, you got it for $3, right?
I think.
On Weed Day. I think it's a safe bet.
Weed. Sorry, go ahead.
Can you be a marijuana leaf in this game? Do you know?
I can neither confirm nor deny because I don't know.
I don't know either. I think it's a safe bet though. If you pick this game up for a couple bucks and you play for 20 minutes until you hear the first Alan Watts thing and you've done a few ascend and descend things, you're going to know if this is a game for you.
Repetition. Be ready.
And if you really want to be sure, you could look up a Let's Play on YouTube. They're all so short. And like we said earlier, you can also look up just the full lecture transcripts of the snippets they use for this game of Alan Watts. That's an option too. I think it totals like 30 minutes of dialogue. That's it.
Yeah. Once you understand the core mechanics, I will say, don't expect it to. There's a reason I call it a Y game and not an X or a Z game, because it is very much simple mechanics. And I would suggest adjusting your sensitivities, because otherwise the controls can be kind of weird. Because I felt like some of the ascension, descension, changing forms got a little clunky for me. Yeah, definitely a slow down and digest this in its entirety, and don't think too much. And the other thing, Rick, and I know you'll agree with this, let your imagination run wild as to how far you can ascend and descend.
Yeah. This is also, if you're the kind of person that likes this, a good game to just, since it autoplays for you, you could just put it on and just have it going like on the TV.
So, at the end of the day, Rick, what was the biggest takeaway for you? Like, what made you... What about this game, dare I ask, changed you?
I hesitate to say changed, but it got me into more of the world of Alan Watts. I don't always see completely eye to eye on particularly Buddhist scholars, just because of, how I perceive things. Alan Watts, self-describing himself as a philosophical entertainer, is so apt and apropos. Couldn't think of a better descriptor if I tried. He's very entertaining to listen to, and he has a very, very clear way of explaining these concepts of Zen and Buddhism and Taoism in a Western dialect that's easy to digest. I think that's the biggest takeaway of the game from me, is just putting me into his world. And I've been happily listening to him on YouTube, as I said.
I'm going to have to listen to more of him, because I just... Yeah, that was some of the best stuff, is that he would come up and say things, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, this is how, yeah, I've never heard it put this way, but that's how I feel about it. That was really nice.
Wow. What a conversation.
I liked it. I liked doing this with you.
It's in length, it's on the shorter side of what we usually do, but it feels there's so much in here that it still feels like I'm feeling the same level of tired I do after we record like a 2.5 hour episode. You know what I mean?
I hope I haven't exhausted you, my goodness.
Yeah, do you have any parting thoughts on this game? I've said everything that I care to say or could say about it.
No, I think I've said everything that I could say too, but I will say, it turns out that the programmer for this game, Damien DeFede, I'm not sure exactly how to say his name, has a Master of Arts in Music Composition from the University of California.
Oh, well, how about that?
And his undergraduate degree is also in composition, so I thought that was kind of wild. Anyway, those are my final thoughts, and there are a lot of books I need to read. Like one title when I was researching Alan Watts, Christ the Eternal Tao. Hello. I'm diving into that.
That's as up your alley as I've ever heard anything.
I'm sweating. You got any closing thoughts, or did you share those in your how it changed your life forever and how you feel like a new baby boy?
I feel like a fresh baby boy. I've said my piece. I think this is well worth the try for anybody. You will know very quickly if it is for you or not, but give it a try. It's cheap, it's short, it's accessible.
We suggest it, and our 7 ratings are not necessarily to say that it is a bad experience. It's just whatever you're looking for in a game, be mindful of.
If you want to be mindful, one thing that you could do is mind your way over to our social media sites, because we've got a few of them. We have got the Instantgram. We are at Pixel Project Radio Podcast, I believe, but if you just search Pixel Project Radio, we come up all the same. It don't make me no difference.
We have a Twitter.
We do. Do you know the @ offhand?
It's at Pixel Project Radio Pod.
Close. It's Pixel Project Pod, I believe.
Damn it to hell. Come on.
But again, the easiest way is to just search Pixel Project Radio, you dummy. We'll come up either way.
The easiest way is to email us.
Yes, you can email us.
It's pixelprojectradio@gmail.com.
It's not just for bills anymore.
No, it ain't. Please get into a flame war with us. You know those arguments that Rick and I were talking about on the internet and how Rick says he doesn't do it? I do, and I'm ready for it.
You don't. He doesn't, but he will.
I will.
He's ready. His soul is ready. We have a Discord too. You can find that link in our Instagram, but also in the episode notes for this show. We put that in there every single time. I started putting all the links at the bottom because it felt weird seeing them at the top, like just a big advertisement billboard. So they're all there. If you wanted to be really mindful and transcend, what you do then is leave us a rating and or review. We've got a couple new ones.
I'm ready. Will they invoke some sort of flame war?
Not a flame war. Actually, the opposite. This one's pretty amicable. And this is from, I know exactly who this is from. This is from Ryan from the Listoff podcast.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, let's plug them for a second. Listoff podcast. I'm fairly certain if you search them, they'll come up. I think they said that somebody else took their name, but
they come up first for me anytime I look them up.
We also follow them and interact, so highly recommend that podcast. But the review title is Smarter? And he goes on to say... He goes on to say, I don't know for sure that listening to Pixel Project Radio actually makes me more intelligent, but it definitely makes me feel more intelligent. And that's all that matters, right?
Wait, what does that mean?
Really makes you feel like Batman.
Does it make you feel like you're smarter than us? Continue, please.
Both Ben and Rick are a treat for the ears, and their extreme knowledge of the games they discuss is super impressive. They are definitely not here to yuck anyone's yum. PPR is a stellar podcast all around. 5-star review.
Ryan Yingling, you old so-and-so. We love you guys. Brian and Ryan, we love you both. Thank you so much. And we would highly, highly recommend Listoff. It's a lot of fun. I don't know how else to put it. It's good, clean fun. It's enjoyable. I don't know. I could just go on and say nice things forever and ever, but
so we will, and we're starting now.
I was going to say, maybe I'll just keep going.
Yeah, recommend their podcast on the highest order of magnitude. It is incredibly good. We were on there. Once upon a time. We talked about games that we wish we could do all over again for the first time.
Yeah, we did.
And it was very fun.
It was a great time. Until everyone started yelling at each other. Sorry.
Over inverted controls and Battlefront. No, that was on our episode with them.
That's true.
Wow. I think that's about all we've got.
I think we should start a Snapchat. I think that's the next social media we need.
Yeah? Are we just going to ignore the current trend of TikTok and go back to like 2012 when Snapchat was all the rage?
Oh, yeah. And we will snap pictures that are completely irrelevant. God, if we started one, I know like 10 people who'd be like, who would follow it just ironically, so.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we love when people listen to our stuff for irony. It doesn't hurt our feelings at all.
No, I'm not crying, you're crying.
Well, thank you for listening. We already got all our plugs out of the way. Next episode for us is going to be a smorgasbord on all things at the cross-section of video games and cinema, Hollywood movies.
I think that's a fair way of putting it, between licensed games, actors who end up in video games that became movies.
We're going to talk about The Simpsons. We're going to talk about Tomb Raider, because that became a movie. Uncharted was recently a movie, I think. We're going to talk about Rami Malek, because he's in a game that we're playing.
Gex.
They didn't. Oh, no. Okay, yeah.
Gex references, yeah.
Canonically, Gex references Jerry Garcia and Richard Simmons. I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, well, on that note, now that Gex has come up, I know that this show is off the rails, and it's time to say goodbye.
It is time to say goodbye. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time.